But I'd like to go back again to the beginning, and I'm curious, as someone who was coming from an arts background, how did you develop your methodology on reporting? What were you using to document initially? What are you using to document now in terms of filming, writing things down, etc.? Again, was this kind of a process, sort of learning on the spot? How did you develop this approach to your work?
I have to think about that. So I did mention that before I got at all political, I did a lot of traveling, and I've always liked writing. I've always kept a journal. So whenever I've traveled, I've kept a journal, and I guess the journaling aspect while traveling was kind of helpful in terms of like then going on to start writing. Because I sometimes when I look back at these journals, I read the description of what I wrote, and I feel like, bang, I'm back there in Scotland or wherever. So I think that was one component, was that I always enjoyed detailing things in writing. When I went to the West Bank, as I said, I opened a blog, and I look back at my early writing, and I'm kind of like cringe because it was pretty amateur, but it was just a work in progress. So um, I think a combination of my like habit of liking to write things down, and then realizing I'm somewhere that I really want it to be, and I want to express what the people I'm meeting have to say, or what they've endured, or what I'm seeing. What did I have in terms of documentation? That was 2007. I would have had like an old Nokia as a phone, so not a smartphone. I had some sort of um, uh, what's it? Smart? No, what's it called? Simple point and shoot camera.
Yeah, point and
Canon.
shoot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably a Canon or something like that. So I had a simple camera. I don't even remember if it was like a memory card, but anyway, very simple camera. I didn't have any professional equipment. I had an old banger of a laptop. So basically, I haven't developed a whole lot more in terms of technology. I did invest in a relatively good amateur SLR camera, but I learned that actually just taking my mobile is a lot easier. It saves space, easier to whip out and film things. As far as the writing, it's at one point I was editing a lot someone else's writing, so I was restructuring very poorly written from somebody, an Arabic speaking journalist, restructuring what he meant to say. So that was helpful as well in learning how to be a better writer. And then just, I don't know, just learning as I went. What for me, I feel like um, not, I think I'm more understated. It's my preferred style. I feel like, because I've seen speakers or pieces where there's too much drama, and I guess I've learned, just if I just state the simple facts, it's often powerful enough. And in fact, like when I used to give lectures in the West, I would just matter of fact show photos or videos and say, this is what happened, this is what happened. And oftentimes at the end of the lecture, people would be crying and say, like, how can you just say that so matter of fact? And I realized at that point that had more impact than being, overly dramatic. So I guess that's kind of how it's evolved. I mean, when I was
Were
first
you were
writing,
you initially recording the interviews before the age of smartphones? Did you have some kind of a recording device, or did you literally write things down like old
I
school?
wrote old school,
Mm,
wrote things down. Yeah. I mean, I
interesting.
start later on recording. I think at one point I did buy a voice recorder thing. And then of course, then we could just use our phones. So that wasn't necessary. But no, initially it was old school, writing things down. And during the 2008-9 war on Gaza, it was definitely a lot of writing things down, because at that point I had a laptop whose battery lasted like 2 seconds or whatever. So I definitely depended on electricity. And I remember the night of the land invasion. So it was, I forget the date, in early January. I was with Palestinian Red Crescent medics. We had been out in ambulances, and we were back in the Red Crescent station in eastern Jabalia. So it was the area, Esbet Abu Rabba was one of the areas that always got invaded first. So we basically stayed there with the shelling very close around us, the power out. And I remember dictating over the phone to somebody who I knew, who was in the West Bank, an article I'd written on a, I don't know, a notepad or whatever. So I dictated it to him. He typed it out and published it. So that's how I did
Wow.
it at that point. Otherwise, then I would keep a notebook, and then I would divide my time between riding with the medics and going back to Gaza City to this one media building that I knew had both electricity and internet, and then type up my notes and just post stuff and then go back out. Yeah.
Do you find writing or video to be more impactful now that it's easier to present actual moving images, or does it really depend on the context?
I guess in this day and age, video is more impactful. I guess I'm still more old school in that I don't really do the selfie video reporting. I prefer to just point the camera at the thing that I'm reporting on. That said, there was it was probably September 2022 in Donetsk. That was really hard. In the space of 5 days, the Ukrainian shelling on three different occasions killed, was it 26 people? And so I was seeing their remains on the streets and sidewalks. And so the second place I went to and I filmed, and it was a ghastly scene where you couldn't even identify what belonged to what. And I blurred the images, and I made a video with voiceover when I got back to the apartment I was renting. And then some Muppet in somewhere in, I don't know, California or New York or something. I didn't really, I wasn't following him, but just people kept sending me this video, and they're saying like, oh, he's saying you're lying because the people are wearing clothes that don't accord with the weather, the temperature that he thinks it is. So he's like, because they're wearing jackets that I wasn't wearing, that means that these are all crisis actors and they're lying. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. And so then the next time Ukraine shelled right near the central market in Donetsk, and I went there and I had body armor on and I filmed, and it was a horrible scene. And then I turned the camera around on myself and I said some words just to say, like, yeah, this is really happening. This is a real thing. That woman screaming over there is really in panic and grief, so, but generally I prefer, like, I don't like to put the camera on myself because I don't think it's necessary. But I guess at some point, in order to establish you're there and this is the date and time, I can see the relevance in doing that. But then I prefer to just have it on the person or people who you're talking about. But I think, I don't know, I think back to your question, I guess it depends who your audience is. Some people prefer to read. Some people, maybe the younger generation prefers the videos. So it's, I guess, a fine balance. But I like to mix both. Like, I like to include, obviously clips that I've done in a longer form article as well.
That's really interesting because you seem to be very consistent. In the beginning of this conversation, you said that your initial blog was anonymous, not because you wanted to conceal who you are, but because you didn't think who you are was important to what you were reporting on. And now you're saying the only reason you're, having to film yourself is to basically prove that, yes, I am on the ground. This is really me. This is not a crisis actor whose, body parts are thrown about the central market. So it really does show this trajectory of this is sort of a necessity, as opposed to I am trying to become this maybe cloud chaser because I'm always in these zones, and that gets gives me more attention. So that seems to be a very consistent trajectory for you. Yes, Marcelo, jump in.
Plus, just want to mention it's very unfair situation because you are filming reality, and as you just mentioned, there's some people screaming of pain. Perhaps the legs are off or whatever, and you're not going to get your microphone and go there. Hey, are you suffering? And at the same time, the propaganda outlets, when they do this, this show up of lies, they do that. Oh, see, these people is suffering. Are you suffering? Yes, I am suffering with all this ketchup in my face, all that kind of stuff. It's an unfair fight.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just showing the image should be enough. Apparently, it's not anymore. Sorry, I just want to
Yeah.
jumping on that.
Well, when Eva was covering this, I remember that footage, and I remember what the Western media was saying, and they were using exactly the same language they would do with Syria and other places. They would say Russia claims that Kiev shelled the center of Donetsk, but we can't really prove it because we're not there. Of course, when it was the other side, it was unquestionable, not even mentioned where the information is coming from. So that was a very interesting trajectory to compare that versus people who are literally showing you what happened, and and it's so horrible that you're having to blur it. And that was going to be my next question. How
just
yeah.
a second, just before you enter that, just Monday I had a conversation with another Canadian, which is Robert Fantina, and we were talking about exactly the thumbnail had the image of that CNN reporter on Syria, chemical attack or whatever, with a backpack sniffing it and saying, yeah, it smells like chemical
It
attack.
smells like chemical weapons. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yep. Breathe in those chemicals, Arwa. Arwa Daman.
It's chemicals.
Yeah.
It reminds me, I mean, that level of coverage is much like that whole British Novichok story with poisonings that never actually poison the people and they're deadly. And again, walking around and sniffing the evidence like it's nothing. It's just kind of remarkable. It's, not even Hollywood level production, and somehow we're expected to fall for it.